Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute and our pals up at Foundry Row in Owings Mills. Had a great chat with Dr. Kevin Crutchfield earlier this week. You can find that out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault as well. Baseball season kind of here. Pitchers and catchers reporting. Some would say it's baseball season. Some here in Baltimore would dispute that, but it has been an interesting offseason and certainly an interesting couple of weeks here as we've turned into 2019 with Hall of Fame conversations for Mike Mussina as well as others and Harold Baines, as well as the death of Frank Robinson. So it gives me a chance to really stretch out, put my feet up before opening day, talk a little baseball, Orioles baseball, and the history of baseball with a guy who does a show called Past Ball Show somewhere in the swamps of Jersey. John Pielli can be found out on iTunes and Google Play hosting his podcast. You can find him on Twitter at John_Pielli. That's Pielli. We welcome him back onto the program as a defending champion. Happy, off-season pitchers and catchers, Valentine's Day, whatever you want to call it, John. Certainly around here being a baseball city with an incredibly rich past, not really much to speak of in the present, and who the hell knows about the future, but it is nice to have you on and certainly nice to get the jumping off point. I guess I contacted you about Mussina, and in the aftermath, Frank Robinson passed away, which has sort of opened all sorts of wounds and scabs and doors and stories, and I know that this is what you sort of dwell in, which is the history of baseball, so it's good to have you aboard, man. Welcome in.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nestor. Look forward to talking to you.
Mussina to the Hall of Fame was the reason I called, so let's start there. And somewhere between Baltimore and Yankee Stadium is where you dwell in New Jersey. And, the first thing that happened the night that he got in the Hall of Fame, and I'm sort of famously friends with him and have known him for a long time. There's all sorts of droppings and evidence of pictures of us with Van Halen and Bon Jovi, amongst others. Van Hagar, I should say, not Van Halen, because thankfully David Lee Roth was nowhere near the stage that night at Merriweather Post Pavilion. But Mussina's Hall of Fame candidacy, and a lot of these guys that sort of twist and Schilling's doing that now. And I'm not talking about the guys that stuck the needles or the clears or the creams, which sort of complicates Bonds and Clemens and other guys. But to me, Mussina was always a Hall of Famer. It was just a matter of how long they were going to make him wait to get in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the problem with Mussina was the fact that he never stood out. He was never considered a Clemens per se, or a Pedro, or a Maddox, or a Glavine, or Smoltz, guys that were considered, the top pitchers in baseball. But he was very consistent. And he was very good. He was always a top of rotation pitcher. He was always getting to the playoffs, even in his years in Baltimore. So, I just don't think he got enough attention, which kind of held him back a little bit. But you look back at the numbers, the 270 wins, 638 winning percentage, and you break down some other more more deeper stats, and you find out that he really was one of the better pitchers of the generation, and is certainly worthy of the Hall of Fame nod that he got this year.
Well, and then there's the Harold Baines argument, which look, man, Harold Baines is shocked he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? And I know LaRusse and other people have made cases, and I know Harold Baines. Harold Baines is from my home state. I love Harold Baines, always loved Harold Baines, and rooted for Harold Baines, and accepted the fact that he was a designated hitter in the same way that I accepted the fact that Edgar Martinez was a designated hitter. I never had a problem with the Hall of Fame candidacy of Edgar Martinez. I always would have checked his box had Angelos not stolen my press pass in 2006. I'd be one of the guys with the Hall of Fame vote at this point after 21 years of having a press pass and covering baseball and running around with baseball. But Harold Baines never would have gotten my vote, and I don't think Harold Baines would have even have been upset with me about that. And I don't know what they're doing in Cooperstown, to be honest. I talked to some folks there this week. As a matter of fact, a couple of hours worth of conversations with folks up in Cooperstown about whether I'm going up there in June or whether I'm not, and how Luis is doing, and the whole deal. And I'm just sort of, I need a bath thinking about it, John, as a lifer baseball fan, and in a lot of ways. In Marvin Miller not being in there, where they are right now with Machado and Harper, and they're obviously colluding again. This is only about the third time in my lifetime, and reading up on things. I'm just I'm not digging where baseball's history is leading me right now and what the Hall of Fame represents, where they let Harold Baines in because he's a nice guy, and I would let him in because he's a nice guy too, but we should let Mike Bordick in because he's a nice guy too, you know?
No, I hear you, Nestor. And listen, I got so many issues with the Hall of Fame going down from, you break down each era of baseball history. And for the most part, for the exception of, let's say, a Shoeless Joe Jackson and a Pete Rose, the best players of each generation going back to the 19th century are all enshrined in the Hall of Fame. So when you look at the Hall of Fame, you can say, these were the best players of this era, these were the best players of this era, these were the best players of the other era. Now, obviously, steroids and use of performance-enhancing drugs complicates things. You throw gambling in there. You throw, I don't know, some issues that players had with the media, whether it's Albert Bell or Kurt Schilling. And you
or, by the way, Jim Rice for 15 years, right? I mean,
yes,
Jim Rice was always a Hall of Famer. The only thing that didn't make him a Hall of Famer was his reputation with the media, literally.
No, absolutely. And you put all these things together, and you have what I'd like to call the Hall of Exclusion. You have almost an entire era during the time of what we call the steroids era of players that are almost trying to be forgotten about by the baseball writers and, to this point, the Veterans Committee. And in baseball, if you compare it to the other four sports and their Hall of Fames, I mean, what other sport has the equivalent of its all-time hits leader, its all-time home runs leader? The players that have had the 5 highest single-season home run totals in the history of the sport. The players with the 3rd and the 4th highest batting average of all time. The player with the most Cy Young awards. The player with the most MVP awards. All these players are not considered amongst the best of the best when it comes to the sport's respective Hall of Fame. Now, listen, we can talk all day about all.
You know what? But here's the deal, man. If you have a voting card and you look at Bonds and you don't like Bonds and you know Bonds cheated and you know all of it was fake and you know Hank Aaron believes that, you know Frank Robinson died believing that, knowing that last week, and how Brooks Robinson feels about that, and how the people who built the game, Joe Morgan's obviously standing out on that issue. When a guy cheated everyone around him and made a fortune doing it and has been afforded this life of being a multi-millionaire forever, why bring him to the hills and put him on a dais and clap for him one more time? I mean, that's what it really comes down to. And I guess if I hold the vote, I harbor some resentment against the users. I mean, I think it's hilarious that Pudge Rodriguez is in and Bonds isn't. I mean, I look at it and say, what are you guys doing here? I was always willing to give Fred McGriff the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to give Cal Ripken the benefit of the doubt, even though he hung out with Brady Anderson all during the steroid era. And we all know Brady didn't use because Brady has said that he didn't use in the same way that Putin said that he never did anything either. So, it's just if you're going to take people at their word, we have guys in there now who are disputed guys. And now it really is about, I don't like that guy. And the Pete Rose thing, don't get me started on that, because I have no doubt that Pete Rose was a scumbag, a sleazeball, a gambler, all of that stuff. But he also had 4,200 hits. You know what I mean? So why do you have this museum up there if you're not going to have him in it? So I feel all of that, and it, again, makes me not want to get in my car and drive up there and drop $2,000 and, to see Mussina on a hill and sweat and come back home and say, what exactly is this place? What exactly is baseball trying to do in 2019? And then I come back to my town, John, and my team's going to lose 100 games for the next 5 years. And they're trying to sell it as Major League Baseball.
No, absolutely. There's a lot there. And I mean, the thing that bothers me the most about the Hall of Fame is just the hypocrisy. And you mentioned on a couple different things of, why some players are in. When you could talk about, let's say, the use of performance-enhancing drugs, there are some players, a couple that likely use that are in. And then you have the whole amphetamine thing. Amphetamines are banned from baseball. A player gets caught using amphetamines, they're suspended accordingly now. So it's something that's been abolished from the game, yet some of the best players. Hey,
can we vacate the 79 Pirates on that rule? Or I'm just asking, I heard We Are Family a couple weeks ago, and we're vacating other things.
No, listen, it's possible.
That make me feel better. I die a happier man thinking that the Pirates didn't really win the World Series in '79. It was amphetamine based, you know. But then I watched the Oakland A's in the late '80s, and Boswell's the only guy in the world writing about steroids, and they obviously were all the whole thing is this tainted. The whole history is tainted. It really is. Going back to Shoeless Joe, right?
No, of course. And if you go back even further, I mean, I've done some research and I've written a couple articles about some 19th century baseball. And you can make a case that there was a borderline between players that happen to be devious and do stuff off the field to actual full-blown criminals that just happen to play Major League Baseball for a living. There's a guy by the name of Terry Larkin who was accused of murder a couple times. So just the time and baseball is not a history of saints. And even when you go through the Hall of Fame, whether it's whatever you want to say about a Ty Cobb or Cap Anson or of course Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was the most blatant racist that existed in the game. Baseball didn't come close to integrating until after his death, in the 1940s. So this is you got the Hall of Fame, which has so many people that are in it that are devious at the very least, and probably pretty bad people. Yet there's some standards set that only the most the most polite and best representation of what baseball should be as the American pastime are allowed to be enshrined in it, and it's just such a hypocrisy, and it honestly makes me sick.
John Pielli here. He is the host of the Passball Show, Baseball, Sports, and Unifying America. You find him on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play. You can also find him at John_Pielli, Pielli. Let's bring this thing full circle here, because I sit here and bitch about all sorts of things, and we talked about Frank Robinson a bunch this week, and the history of the Orioles and where my franchise is, and we've all read Astro Ball here and kind of got caught up in Mike Elias and the stats and Sig Mejdal and what they're building and what they plan to build here, but the present-day state of the Orioles is gross. The present-day state of the haves and have-nots in baseball and tankers and rebuilders is sort of weird and gross. But this offseason, where all of these owners have amassed all these riches from these RSNs and all the negotiating they've done and fans coming to the game and the growth problems in the game, and here's Machado and Harper, the two stars, the Reggie Jacksons, the leaders of the Barry Bonds of their generation, and they can't get gainfully employed, and it's mid-February, John. I mean, it's not a good look for anybody involved with the game, and it doesn't sell the game well, and it makes these guys look a little toxic, throughout the game, I think. Sort of how do you put them on the wall as the savior of your franchise when they're being passed around like hot potato here for 2 months?
Well, of course. And, the most obvious statement you can make is, come on, there's at least 20, maybe 25 teams that could benefit in the short and long term by having either Bryce Harper or Manny Machado on their team. And, the biggest question I would have is why, really outside of the monetary aspect of it, do so many teams at this point not look at these guys as that much of an integral part of their franchise that they could put them over the top? And then that takes me to the conversation I've had a couple times on my show about, where's the priority to winning in an individual sports franchise, particularly as it applies to baseball. You hear the Astros model or, the model of some of the other teams that have gone down and rebuild it from the bottom, obviously what the Baltimore Orioles are going through right now. And it doesn't always produce the fruits of a championship like the Houston Astros, did. So you got a handful of teams, which, maybe less than 10 in Major League Baseball, that you could say right now are really going for the entire thing, that consider themselves a World Series championship contender, that are going to go for it with every single thing that they got. And if they don't win a World Series, they're going to consider it a failure. You got about 10 teams that are hoping that they could take the right steps and go in that direction. And then you got almost about 10 teams that are completely tanking and could care less about winning. That impacts the free agency process, too, because those teams obviously aren't going to be in on anybody. And then the teams in the middle of the pack might say, all right, well, if things don't work out this year, we have a little bit of pop-out or we have a little bit of an excuse. And it bothers me to a point where so many teams would not consider themselves better if they had Bryce Harper or Manny Machado, which is, a complete and utter lie if anybody wants to say that to you.
Well, the other part of this from our local perspective is what the Masson money represented and how much of it has gone into the Angelos' pockets and how much of that the Nationals are eventually going to get from them. And then what it means over the next 5 years for them to say, well, we're doing it the Astros way. Well, that just means that you're going to be cheap. It means you're not going to really invest any money. You're going to talk about what you're investing in the Caribbean and all this stuff, which is really pennies versus what you would need to invest to keep Manny Machado on the field and keep people coming to your ballpark and giving yourself some semblance of hope of winning somewhere in the near short term. It has become this narrative, this pablum they speak that they sell to the fan base of hope 4 years from now. But in the meantime, we'll give you a bobblehead if you give us $5 more on Thursday night. That's what they have to sell right now. And I don't know, in the modern era, I guess for what they're trying to do and how much money they're pocketing off the television network that doesn't go near the baseball team, and they're trying to run the baseball team as a break-even operation by not having a floor at all on the salary. And I've talked about this for 27 years on the radio, John. The Players Association, they always negotiated the top end. They never figured out the bottom end. And there was always some San Diego Padres or some Marlins or some Astros or some Orioles having a fire sale that really it wasn't good for the union and isn't good for the players. And now they're finding that out when any team can say, we're just going to rebuild right now, and we're not interested in anybody that's Adam Jones or Bryce Harper. We're not interested in anyone that can play Major League Baseball. We're only interested in guys that are cheap that might one day be able to play Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me the most. You look back at it, and I've done some research on this. It seems like teams are more interested in breaking even or making money as a means to winning the entire thing. And I had suggested, a couple weeks ago, the possibility of maybe making a World Series championship more lucrative to a team and an organization. You see all that money that comes in through, the television networks, but most importantly, the money that's shared throughout baseball, seems to make it to where the majority of the teams are making money. Now, what would make teams possibly be more interested in winning the World Series and making sure that they win it sooner rather than later and more often than not might be to put more money in the team's pockets if they actually won the World Series. Maybe player shares could go up. Maybe the amount of money that's allotted to the team that wins the World Series as opposed to the other 29 teams that don't makes it more lucrative for the rest of baseball to want to win the World Series this year. You just don't seem to have that many teams that care whether they win it this year or not. They just want to sell to the fans and the media markets and the areas and regions that they have a baseball team in that there's a possibility that, baseball could be fun this year. And it just bothers me that less teams care about winning the entire thing.
I think it bothers a lot of people, John, which is why less young people are watching, right? Like, you're up there in the swamps of Jersey, right? Lots of kids kicking soccer balls, lots of girls kicking soccer balls, lots of boys throwing lacrosse balls and girls throwing lacrosse balls, as well as playing football and basketball, all the things that we were always doing. But, boy, I'm in a baseball town, bro, and this family over a quarter of a century has literally all but killed baseball in my marketplace. Literally taken a radio station that I founded 20 years ago on a format of baseball and football. Baseball's not a format in our town anymore. It certainly isn't going to be over the next 5 years.
Now, it's going to be hard for it to be. And the problem is that you're getting sold, from your new general manager and your new front office and ownership and everything that comes from the Orioles that, hey, good times are on the way. And, unfortunately, it's going to come at the expense of some very bad times. And I look at this Orioles team, and sure, every team in baseball has a couple players that you could point to and say, hey, they may exceed expectations. But this is going to be a historically bad season for the Baltimore Orioles. I'm thinking 1962 Mets. I'm thinking, 2011 Astros. I'm thinking 1916.
Dude. We did a $115 last year. Do you really think they can lose more than 115 games?
I think it's possible. But that being said, the only saving grace, Nestor, I think, is the fact that there are other teams in that boat. you wonder what's happening with, let's say, Seattle. You wonder what's happening with, let's say, the Arizona Diamondbacks. If there's enough tankers out there in baseball, then I think that'll keep one or two teams from being, as historically bad. If the historical amount of losses are spread out amongst 3-4 teams as opposed to just 1 or 2, then I think that could save the Orioles. Maybe they could lose just, 105 to 110 games this year. But, if
that makes me feel so much better. I feel so much warmer and fuzzier about 105 losses. So talk real sexy to me, John. Talk about 98 losses. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That really turns me on. 98 losses. That'll fix things. John Pielli here. He is a baseball star. Tell everybody what you do and your love and passion for baseball, because I haven't had you on in a while. I want to give you a chance to promote what you're doing these days, man.
No, it's funny, man. For years, I've been, talking about baseball history and baseball events and things as they apply to now. I've kind of branched out to, bring up other sports. We talk a lot more football and basketball now, but we have another topic of just, trying to do the right thing. And one of the things that I hate more than anything, and I consider myself apolitical. I don't discuss politics whatsoever on my show. The bottom line is we have two political parties in this country as they're set to divide us. So it's almost like you're picking or choosing which one of the terroristic organizations you want to support. I want to create a third, region of people that just care about everybody and understand the fact that we all have differences. We all have reasons for believing different things that we do, and to respect the fact that somebody may have a difference in opinion with us. And then as it applies to sports, we just continue to, talk about, serious topics like the Hall of Fame, different things like, payrolls being the way they are and teams tanking as opposed to not having the opportunity to, want to win a World Series. And it's just great to just continue to push that stuff out there. Obviously, you can find me on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and there's many different ways you can interact with the show.
Cool. Well, I'm sure interacting with the designated hitter, which I've been on the air 27 years in Baltimore, dude. And for the beginning, when I went on the air like 92, 93, first of all, we didn't have a football team, right? We were longing for that. So the off season really was baseball, hot stove, winter meetings, spring training, pitchers and catchers. I mean, my body clock is all sort of set to that. And I actually tweeted the other day, it used to be like the day pitchers and catchers report. It was like this big day in Baltimore. Now it's just sort of a cold, dreary day in February in Baltimore. But I would say this on the baseball side of things and where we are on a year by year basis, there is a little body clock that sort of gets moving this time of the year when spring is sprung and we think of baseball. And when you don't have a chance to win, it really bums you out, and you wind up talking about things like the designated hitter. Like I remember the dump the DH bumper stickers in the 1980s and 90s. It's amazing to me in 2019 that we still don't have the designated hitter in the National League. Like, I'm sort of blown away by that it's been 50 years,
Yeah, as a National League fan, which I pretty much have been since birth, I have reasons for maybe not wanting to see the designated hitter, but I've accepted the fact that it has to come. I mean, there's so many problems with the fact that, as they're running their players through their minor league systems, don't want their pitchers to hit. So these guys, there's no way they're going to get any better. There's no way that they're going to give themselves any sort of advantage or, at least passable opportunity at the plate. And the thing that bothers me, the most about it is going back 30, 40, 50 years, pitchers used to take batting practice. It's forbidden now that, at the risk of that star arm, that guy that could throw so hard and potentially be a force for a major league pitching staff, that person is forbidden for taking batting practice now. So you put all these things together and you just understand that there's really no other choice. Baseball has to move towards the designated hitter, and you could be the most, National League centric guy, baseball purist, whatever you want. You have to understand that the game has just changed to a point where it just doesn't make sense to have a pitcher bat when they're not even going to try or give any effort at the plate, or organizations don't even want them to come up to the plate at the risk of injury.
John Pielli can be heard out at iTunes and Google Play and YouTube doing the Passball Show. You can find him at John_Pielli. That's Pielli. You've been a great guest. Appreciate you making some time and talking about the game that we used to love, the Past Its Time game and all that, in the Pass Ball Show. I don't know. I'm having a hard time putting the baseball thing together here this offseason. I really am. I'm trying to figure. The Orioles didn't even have their tickets on sale 2 weeks ago. Talk about not trying. I'm trying to figure out how they're running their business, that, because my business abuts their business. So it's just a fascinating case study, but I will continue to research it and continue to have guys like you on when I do want to talk some baseball. Thanks for coming on, John.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nestor. Always a pleasure talking to you.
John Pielli, host of the Pass Ball Show up there in the swamps of New Jersey, home of the Smithereens and Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi and the Jets and the Giants. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And always, you can find us in the buyatoyota.com audio of all 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. It's all brought to you by buyatoyota.com. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.